The problem with your R&D tax credit claim might not be what you're claiming, it might be how you're splitting the costs. That process is called apportionment, and it's one of the most important things to get right in any R&D claim. Apportionment simply means working out what percentage of a cost genuinely relates to your qualifying R&D activity. Most employees, software licenses, and materials aren't used exclusively for R&D, so HMRC expects you to claim only the portion that does. And critically, that apportionment needs to be made on a just and reasonable basis. That means a clear and consistent method you can actually explain and back up with evidence. One important note: if you have multiple R&D projects, you need to apportion costs across each individual project. That breakdown is required when you submit your additional information form to HMRC. So let's go through the main cost categories. Staff costs are usually the biggest part of any R&D claim. You're looking at salaries, employer national insurance, pension contributions, and bonuses. To apportion these, you estimate what percentage of each employee's time was spent on qualifying R&D. Timesheets are the gold standard here. HMRC considers contemporaneous records the strongest form of evidence. But if you don't have formal timesheets, you can still claim. Retrospective estimates are widely accepted as long as they're credible and consistent. If a developer spent around 60% of their time on R&D, that's entirely reasonable. But claiming that a finance manager spent 80% of their time on R&D is where you'll get questions. For subcontractors, the key rule is the 65% cap. You can only include 65% of qualifying subcontractor expenditure in your claim. This accounts for the commercial markup of contractor invoices. If a subcontractor worked on both R&D and non-R&D activities, you'll need to apportion the invoice first and then apply the cap. However, it's possible that your subcontractor was hired to only carry out R&D, so you might be able to claim the full 65%. There are different rules for connected subcontractors though, which you will need to bear in mind. Externally provided workers, which are people placed through agencies who work under your direction, follow the same logic as staff costs, but the 65% cap applies here too. So you apportion for R&D first and then apply the cap to the qualifying portion. Software, data licenses, and cloud computing costs all require apportionment too, because they almost always serve a broader purpose beyond R&D. For software licenses, a common approach is to look at how many users of that tool are working on qualifying R&D versus total users, and apply that ratio. For cloud computing, the cleanest method is project tagging in your billing account. But there are lots of other methods you could use. It's about finding out what works for your company. For consumables like materials, chemicals, components, and even utilities, you apportion based on what was actually used in qualifying R&D versus routine production. One rule to be aware of is that if a prototype is later sold, the costs associated with it can't be included in the claim. So what evidence do you actually need? You don't need perfect records, but you do need something. For staff, that could be timesheets, sprint boards, Jira and GitHub logs, or management interviews. For subcontractors, it's more likely to be contracts, statements of work, and invoices. For software and cloud computing, it's license agreements, usage logs, and billing reports. For consumables, consider purchase orders or lab and production records. The most common mistakes we see are companies claiming high staff percentages without supporting evidence, applying identical percentages across each employee, and, perhaps the most serious, not keeping any evidence of your apportionments. Even if your numbers are entirely reasonable, not being able to explain them is a real problem in a compliance check. If you want to read the full breakdown of every cost category, including examples, check out our article.